Hi, everyone. Welcome, Walter McKenzie, the Worthy Educator. Very excited to have with us today Doctors Melinda Bier and Tom Hoerr from the University of Missouri at St. Louis. And we're here to talk about the new EdD program in character development, social emotional learning, and leadership at the University of Missouri, St. Louis. So, Tom and Melinda, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tell us some background about the School of Education there at University of Missouri, St. Louis.
Well, let's see. Starting off with the University of Missouri is a land grant mission um, university. We have 4 campuses. We are the urban campus here in St. Louis. And we actually have an interesting history being that it began as a teachers college that was started by the people of Normandy. There was a golf course here and a monastery originally, and they purchased the land because and wanted to give it to the university because they really wanted to have a university close to them and to develop teachers. So they were really original at the Grow Your Own. I think that was like in 1963.
Wow.
But the College of Education here is it's a great place to work. It's a great place for our students. Our faculty are very student-centered. They thrive on the fact that we have a lot of non-traditional students. We have several programs that allow people to enter the classroom in non-traditional ways. But for people who enter to become teachers in the traditional way, they really have redesigned the programming to get students into the classroom as early and as often as possible. So I really enjoy my colleagues. I'm actually something called I'm the Teresa M. Fisher Professor for Citizenship Education, which is part of the DESLI Collaborative, which is something that is really special here. It's special here in St. Louis because it's more than one university, but it was this vision of a man named Desley who came back to St. Louis after the Second World War, and he made a lot of money and spent the last decades of his life uh, really endowing these professorships that had a very special mission. They were supposed to fund people who would have one foot in the university and one foot in the community. He wanted the university to really serve the needs of the citizens of St. Louis and Missouri. And so he funded 32 or 34 well, actually, he funded a number of them, but some other people like Teresa Fisher funded, he got his friends in the community to also fund these chairs. And it ended up that there were 34 of them. Most of them are here at the University of Missouri, St. Louis, and the majority of those are here in the College of Education. So, and I think it's part of our mission to be very community based. The college and the university are what's known as anchor institutions, and so we are engaged in scholarship that helps the citizens. And so thank you for letting me tell you all about the history of my position and our college. But we have a really robust EdD program.
Yes.
And Tom and I are thrilled that you're giving us the opportunity to talk about this will actually be the 4th cohort that has character as its mission. But Tom and I have been thinking about ways in which we wanted to change the EdD for the last 2 years. And we're really excited that we've had the opportunity to make it very explicitly character education, social emotional learning, and leadership. So, and that a couple of the changes that we've made are one, that it is both very practical. We really want this, we wanted to design this so that it served that mission I talked about, that it is both people here that are scholar practitioners, but also that it's going to include practitioner scholars that are still in the field, the K-12 field, that are still working in the buildings. There's been so many changes. We wanted it to be really relevant to those who were struggling through issues of social emotional learning, leadership. How do you use power to, and how do you keep the well-being and joy in schools for both the students and the adults? So we are as much about how do you lead the adult culture as we are about the kids. And I'm just going to say, Tom, in case you want to jump in, I was just going to maybe talk a little bit about the logistics.
Let me jump in and do a little more
Great,
framing,
great.
if I might. Agreeing with everything Mindy said, when I talk to people, I say that my shorthand for our program is who you are is more important than what you know. Let me say that again. Who you are is more important than what you know. And often when people hear that, they kind of step back and they, particularly educators, think I'm denigrating scholastics, and I'm not at all. Kids need to learn how to read, write, and calculate, period, end of paragraph. However, when we look at the world today, what we realize, I think, is that the people who succeed, however you define success, do so not simply because of their ability with the 3 R's. It's because of their ability to know themselves, work with other people. If they're a leader, establish a culture where everybody grows, not just the kids. And that's really what this program is designed to do. We were very intentional about the title, character development, social emotional learning, and leadership. And each one of those is different. But if you've got a Venn diagram in your mind, they overlap completely. I would add one more comment, and then I'll turn it back to Walter, and that is that Mindy talked about us being an urban campus. I have been teaching in the graduate program for a decade now, since I left the New City School. And most of the people that I teach are currently teachers pursuing master's degrees or pursuing doctorates. And the best thing I can say about them, I say to my wife often, I would hire these people in a heartbeat. There are folks who come to the classroom, often at the end of the day, they've worked all day, they're tired, but they're sharp. And when I give them assignments, readings to which they react, when you have class discussions, there's lots of times when I think, wow, I wish I would have thought of that. So the kind of people that we attract are the kind of people with whom you want to work, with you want to learn, the kind of people that you want in leadership roles, and focusing on social emotional learning and character development, we think prepares these students getting their doctorate for the future. So, Walter, we've both rambled.
Wonderful stuff. And, you're speaking to my heart because we've been working with the launch of the Word the Educator to try and define what education transformed looks like. And with all the disruption going on, there's certainly going to be opportunity for change. And one of the themes that has come through loud and clear is the need to bring the community into education, into the schools, be not just informing and participating, but helping to lead. And so hearing the way things are set up there on campus is just amazing, especially at the higher ed level. The vision of the founders certainly is timely and serving everyone well. I will ask this because it is so timely. This is not coincidence that you just happen to be launching this. But if we go back 10 years before the pandemic and before everything that's now happening in education, do you think this could have happened 10 years ago? Or is this truly a response to the needs of society right now, of leaders in education right now? And you're responding to what you see happening in the profession.
Mindy's going to answer that, but before she does, I just jumped in because what neither she nor I said that your listeners should know, this is an all virtual program, mostly synchronous, so you can be anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world, and we will all learn together. All right, Mindy.
And just, I think one thing that could not have happened 10 years ago was that it is a national cohort of students also. Tom and I were co-teaching. We were actually teaching something that servant leadership, which was a Templeton funded program. So I had some funding from the John Templeton Foundation to develop the servant leadership program for educational leaders. And so Tom went on that journey with me in terms of let's try it out, let's pilot it. And we were doing that with courses that were in person with folks from St. Louis, and the pandemic hit. And suddenly we had this opportunity to open the course up. And amazingly, we couldn't close it fast enough because people signed up from both coasts. And it was so exciting for us because as we were teaching, we found that you always learn more from your students, I think, than they learned from you. However, what we loved was how much they learned from each other, and especially those people that were located far from them. So that was a really great experience that kind of started us on this journey of rethinking the EDD. So while here in St. Louis, character education has been important for some 35 years because of some Sandy McDonald, who I always go back to. He was a very gracious servant leader of McDonnell Douglas years ago. And what's important to me about always bringing up Sandy is that he wanted anyone who worked in K-12, if they wanted to work on character education, he wanted them to be able to get that. So he had that old-fashioned idea of philanthropy, that he raised the money every year for professional development, and he formed institutions to provide it. But what I loved about Sandy is that he himself was an engineer. He was a pioneer of the aerospace industry. And yet he spent the last 25 years of his life not on science education or math education. He spent it on character education, what we used to call the other side of the report card.
Right.
Knowing how important academics are, and my research is, I've been doing research on what works in character education with my colleague Marvin Berkowitz for 25 years. And we always find that when you implement this well, academics follow, gains in academics follow. So we know how important academics are. But if you concentrate on the social, emotional, and ethical issues in schools, you're going to get the academic gains. So that's the founding of this. We started this with John Templeton and Sandy McDonald's kind of their donor intent, and it has been a wonderful ride. And now we are kind of looking at this great revision of what a doctorate looks like, that that the Carnegie Foundation put in place, that you could have these more practitioner scholar based programs, that instead of being the traditional, like the PhD that I got, that Tom got, where it's really you take your courses and then you do research, your novel research, and where this is really based on the practical problems that practitioners have. It gives them more freedom. I think that it gives the possibility of growing over time and focusing on what's important in your role. And so we have students who are doing really creative projects, not just the traditional kinds of research. And they're using new methodology. It's as much qualitative as quantitative. There's a lot of mixed methods, but there are also some really new strategies that people are very interested in and that we're seeing. And so we're really excited about that opportunity for the students to help us design this as we go. So practical pieces of this is that it's a 3-year program. It is very much based on trying to make sure that the coursework leads to the dissertation. So 2 years of coursework. It is we are starting in January, so it will be the spring semester, the summer semester, and the fall semester for 3 years. And it takes place on 2 nights, Tuesday and Wednesday night. Part of it, the majority of it is synchronous. So we'll be meeting just like we're meeting with you.
Yeah.
And it'll be interactive. And then there will be some parts of it that will also be asynchronous. More of what happens on the Wednesday nights will have some asynchronous pieces to it. But it'll be 6 credits for each semester. And so that's 18 credits a year. and that you should be able to work with us to design your program plan so that you will be complete in 3 years. That said, life happens, and we've had great people who got promoted, during the course of their EDD program, and so they have, taken a little longer to complete their dissertation, or some people whose dissertation projects just took longer for what they wanted to do and the data they wanted to collect. So I think a theme here at the College of Education is that we are very student-centered. And so we mean to work with our students, and we also have made a commitment to individual projects. So this isn't a program that forces people to work in teams, but we do allow teams and encourage teams. If there is a team that even through enrollment wants to work together on a problem, they can.
Mhm. And it sounds like
A
it
breath.
kind of bringing it all in together. I'm trying to wrap my head around it. That this is action research. This is within your district or within your organization, looking at a problem or practice and having, for lack of a better word, the luxury of focusing in and really looking for some outcomes and solutions. Can you give us some examples, at least hypothetically, of what some problems of practice might be that you're hoping would be great examples of what people could bring into the
So
program?
I will give
Yeah.
one. Oh, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Go ahead, Tom. Do you
Go
want
ahead, Mindy.
Oh, I was just going to give a start and then Tom can give another. And
Yeah.
this was one of the few projects that actually did work together. Kristen Pelster and Erica Niles
Mhm.
worked together because they started the program in person, and then the COVID hit. And so they ended it in virtual, but they wanted to know what was different. What did teachers, because they were both from the world of leadership, administrators of schools, and they wanted to know what was different about what teachers needed from their leadership, from their administrators once COVID hit. What was the prior? Was it different? First of all, that question, and then what was it that was different? And that was a really exciting dissertation,
Yeah.
but a very practical problem that they were struggling with.
And
Wonderful.
I'll give two other examples.
Yeah.
We had excuse me, we had a person who was a coach, and he wanted to look at the role of character in coaching. And his premise, I think that most of us know this, too often sportsmanship is only something that's talked about. You don't really see it on the athletic field. And so he developed a curriculum, if you will. He identified a number of coaches, high school coaches around the country, and basically he worked with them. They read some things, he gave them things to do, and then he gave them a survey at the end. And what he found is that all of them felt that consciously working on developing character as part of the athletic competition really helped their kids. So that was really gratifying. We had another woman in a previous doctorate who was a principal and felt that too often professional development for principals doesn't really give them the skills they need. So she designed an entire PD program that she can go out and take to principals. And to speak to your point, Walter, these were firsthand visceral issues. People were living and dealing with these. And when they got in the program, they wanted to use their dissertation not only to become an expert in this area, which they do, but they wanted to be able to make a difference. And when Mindy and I think about our program, the dissertations are going to be very pragmatic. What we're going to do is help students pick something that sings to their heart, something that they want to really know about. And when they're done, they're going to have knowledge that will help them make an even bigger difference in the world. So that's pretty exciting.
It is. I was just talking to a young man last week down in Roanoke, Virginia, who leads their higher education consortium for that part of Southwest Virginia. And he's trying to problem solve how to support adult learners who are going back to school, whether to finish their education or pursue career advancement, and all the challenges that people have as adults that you don't have when you're 18 and just rolling in out of high school. Is something like that ripe for this kind of program, or should the problem of practice inherently come with character and SEL, obviously, like feathers in the cap when they present it? Or will they find out the implications of character and SEL and leadership as they pursue the problem or practice?
Tom, you want to take that or?
No, that sounds
Okay.
exactly like your kind of issue.
So, so what I believe that is because there are so many aspects of character and social emotional learning. So um, we want people to want to do and to have dissertations that incorporate these issues. And so, for instance, though, what I was talking about earlier, Erica Niles and Kristen Pelster,
Yes.
what they were looking at was the fact that prior to the pandemic, many teachers didn't think about wanting social emotional support from
Right.
their leaders. But during the pandemic, they found that that was a priority need for them. And so I think that while we do, want these issues to be at the forefront of,
Mhm.
they are naturally. And
Yeah.
so with adult learning, especially, I think that as we know from looking at non-traditional students here on campus and the literature about how to support non-traditional students, that they need more of those kinds of supports. They need more of the mentoring and coaching and social emotional support than students in the past did.
It's
And,
so
and
true.
Walter, I would say that exactly, and I would tie it back to your question of 10, 12 minutes ago, when
Yeah.
you said, could this program have happened, 10 years ago?
Yeah.
And, the reality is, I think everybody's going to agree, uh, and I won't say the world has changed, although it has, but I will say the United States has changed. Society is different than it used to be. In my classes that I'm teaching right now on Monday and Tuesday nights, these are practicing educators, and they're dealing with issues with which we didn't have to deal 10 years ago. Um, I've had some principals talking about the training they're getting when folks from ICE come in and want to know if there are any immigrants in the school. How do you
Yeah.
handle that? What do you
Yeah.
do?
Yeah.
We've talked about increased stress, the whole political divide and how that plays out. So Tom Hoerr, and I've known Walter for many years before we were both born, but I would argue that social emotional learning and character have always been integral to helping develop good citizens, good people. That is even more the case than it is today. And I think we're beginning to see a bit of a turnaround. I'm beginning to hear more and more people feel that there's a readiness in the country to say, let's be really explicit about what we need to do to prepare children for tomorrow. It's not just where they're going to go to school, what job are they going to get. Those are important. But what's more important, what kind of people are they going to be? Are they going to be the kinds of folks that you want to have as your neighbor? And that, I think, fits directly with what we're going to be working on in this doctorate.
It's such an important point. And I'm thinking as the two of you are responding that one of the challenges with education today is trying to keep up with how fast society is changing. And yet, when you're talking about things like character and SEL, these are things that should be evergreen. They shouldn't be changing. And so you can say, here's some anchors that we can hold on to as we navigate this unknown world that we're moving forward in. Do you find in general that the education leaders that are coming to you perceive this need, or is this a journey of discovery for them where you help them understand that these are important new attributes that need to be cultivated?
I think they feel the need. I mean, it's one of the reasons this program is so attractive. What we're talking about here sounds really good. Nobody's going to disagree. But I got to tell you, if you're in a school, you're living it. You're seeing what's happening with these families. You're seeing what happens with kids, and you're seeing what happens with teachers. I mean, I would suggest that if you somehow gave a stress test to people working in K-12 schools, unfortunately, the score is going to be higher than it was a decade ago. And good leaders acknowledge that. It's what Mindy referred to when she talked about this dissertation, and they address that. And if you're a good leader, you recognize your job is not simply to help children learn, which it is. It's to help everybody in the building learn. And that, from the custodian to the security guy to the secretary to your teachers. And if you take that global view, social emotional learning and character have to be part of the solution.
And I would guess that wellness is kind of underscored in all of this, that with all of the stress and change and unknown, that that's part of what you're helping educators keep an eye on in all of this.
So one of the things that in this project around servant leadership, leadership virtues, and how to cultivate leadership virtues, there were words and terms that we didn't used to hear in education, or at least not in my education, and such as self-care. Self-care now is very prominent, and well-being is an important outcome, which didn't used to be on these diagrams of the inputs and the outputs, right? But now well-being is an important outcome. And so we looked across not just education, but we looked across other fields to find out what produces these outcomes for, looking at the school as a workplace, and what produces the outcomes that we need to improve in education, because we know that educators are the most stressed of employees.
Yes.
And right. And so what we found in looking at, what particular virtues or attributes lead to the outcomes of a positive climate for the school, that lead to longevity for the employees, that even lead to leaders staying longer, because we know that our building leaders and our district leaders are, their tenure is getting shorter and shorter because of the amount of stress that's in the field. So, and while we always talk about how stressful it is to be an educator, and it is, and how as the different people take these surveys, that teachers always come out as the highest stressed over the last few years. However, teachers also come out as are the most likely to say they laughed yesterday. They feel like their work is valuable and what they do is important. So as much as we talk about how we need to support teachers in ways that we didn't used to, we also need to remember that this is still one of the most fulfilling professions for people to go into.
Absolutely.
Amen. And I would take that a step further and even suggest that leaders in education that are more self-aware in terms of SEL and character and leadership will help with this whole question of retaining
Yep.
and building careers that span a lifetime, as opposed to the current trend where we see a lot of people hopping in and hopping out because they're not getting the support they need and they're
Yep.
not feeling the continuity of leadership that allows them to be successful. Am I overstating my case, or?
I don't
No,
think so.
absolutely.
You're absolutely right. It used to be, and this hasn't changed, that to become a really great teacher, there's some few teachers who are just naturally wonderful teachers, very few. Most of us have to learn. And it's not an event. It takes multiple years. And unfortunately, we lose folks before they become the great teachers they would be. And we really need to put structures in place. We need to make sure that we're educating people in higher ed, right? Educating our teachers, educating our leaders, so that they can stay and have some of these skills before they enter the school, so that it's not trial and error, and that we don't lose so many. So I think that you're absolutely right in what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm thinking of Rose Chu out of Minnesota, who leads the statewide Elevate Teaching Initiative there. And she talks about redefining the narrative and how if we get teachers to stay in those early formative years, and we all struggled, even those of us that came out of traditional 4-year teacher training programs, we weren't ready. You have to hit the ground and learn by doing. That if you get through those early years, you stay because you've learned resilience, you've learned grit. Tom, you know these things, and it becomes what you build the entire career on. But we have to get them to stay. We can't simply leave them to try and then walk away disappointed because they don't have the supports they need. So kudos. Tell us more about some of the courses. So I'm gung ho. I sign up. I'm ready for this. And what can I expect in terms of coursework those first couple of years?
Well, I'll start off. Mindy's going to talk about our servant leadership course, but the
Yeah.
class that I'm teaching right now that I will be teaching in year one is social emotional learning and leadership. And that's a class very specifically that looks at the intersection, again, of SEL and leadership. I
Yeah.
have my students reading articles every week to which they react. Most of the articles are not education articles. I have them reading from business, from other literature, and I'll have them go in and look at their schools from a different perspective. I wrote a book called Social Emotional Learning and Leadership, and I use school culture as the template, if you will, to look at social emotional learning. So one of the things I have my students do is go through their schools, walk through their buildings. And most of us, you park your car here, you go through that door, you go the same route. I have them walk through all the halls and look at what's posted. What are the messages? What's said? Equally significant, what's not said. And then we talk about that in class. And it is always a revelation. It's a good example of something that you take for granted, but when you think about what it could be, there's an enormous amount of potential. Mindy, servant leadership?
Yeah, so here at the Center for Character and Citizenship, which I co-direct, we have a number of models where we have taken the literature, the research base, and transferred that into models of professional development and ways in which this can improve the way schools operate. And so one of them is called Civil, and it was this investigation of when we realized, okay, the leadership models that we have aren't working well because the leaders in schools are extremely stressed. What they learned in our colleges of education isn't typically what they need now, because it used to be all about accountability, and we really trained teachers in ways that are now some are, I'm sorry, trained administrators in ways that are now kind of antithetical to what we need them to be. And so I started looking at the literature and looking at other fields, and that's how I came to that servant leadership was really a model that had good research in terms of it produced the outcomes that we needed in education. And primarily it's about power and the legitimate use of power. So educators are so powerful, be they teachers in the classroom with students, or leaders in the building for their teachers and their community, leaders at the district level. And so how do you use power to help other people grow? And so that's really what that course is all about, is the legitimate use of power, how to help other people grow and develop, not just students, but the adults in the building. How do you make sure that you communicate to the community, to parents, that you have to have a humble attitude. We call this cultural humility, that you can't necessarily be proficient in everyone else's culture. You have to have humility. You have to proactively get other people's opinions. You need to value their opinions. And these are skills that we can teach, and that we can have folks practice the cultivation of these virtues. And so we have a model, and our students go through this process of what we believe is the first thing that needs to happen, and that's the personal transformation. So when we've seen really successful leaders in schools, the difference between those leaders and others, it's that they take a look in the mirror first. They see what they need to change and how they need to help others along the way. And so that's one of our courses. It's about how to help, and it's about professional growth,
Yeah.
knowing folks personally and professionally, and how do you navigate those waters. So that's one course. Another course is social justice.
Yes.
So social justice and democratic values.
Yes.
That's an incredibly important course,
Very
and we're really excited to have instructors that have lived this and the struggles that now come along with using these terms, even
Yeah. Yeah.
Tim Harris and his wife, Erica. Um, Erica Harris is a librarian, So, at the forefront of some of the struggles around language and resources. Terry Harris is at the district level. And so, but we have seen him in action in terms of how he works with students and how he works with students to have academic identities when they may not feel like they were included or that this academic structure was built for them. So we're really excited to have these practitioners who at multiple levels are in the daily struggle with these very, very polarizing ideas.
It's really powerful. And I'm thinking as you're talking, one of my roles before I retired was working with an emerging leaders program. So people that were 40 and under. They kept me young. They also taught me a lot. And part of it was they value authenticity and they see it coming up. Those of us who are above 40, I'll say, to be diplomatic,
I
um,
barely made that.
you know, it we're very competent and proficient. And as Mindy said, we learned about accountability. We learned about power structures. We knew how to work our way up in districts, but we don't necessarily have the awareness. And so when a Gen Z or a millennial sees us coming, we may not come off authentic at all. We may sound like we're just part of the problem. And it sounds like what you're saying is, regardless of where you are in your leadership journey, if you come into this program, building that self-awareness and being able to cultivate that authenticity based on who you are. It's not a formula, it's not a cookie cutter.
Right.
And certainly different people will come in and struggle with different pieces of that because you may not have been aware that you were such a bam, bam, bam. Here we are, we do it by the book, and then you get in and you get out. Um, that's an incredible advantage to give administrators who, if they come in and aren't necessarily self-aware, will come out with a whole new skill set and a whole new way of presenting themselves that if they see you coming a mile away and they don't see authentic, they're not going to stick around.
It's interesting that you raised that because I think of that one of the virtues that we look at is forgiveness and how much forgiveness needs to happen in schools and with leaders, with teachers. And I know that for me, I can still remember the faces of kids that when I was a beginning teacher, I didn't know how to help them. I didn't know how. And I carry that guilt around, right? And we need to have ways in which that we can forgive ourselves and make sure that the weight of the resentments, that anything that is, human based over time in a school where you have many people working and there are going to be conflicts, there are going to be things that happen. And if you don't dissipate the issues, the resentment, if you don't have ways to restore the positive culture and the positive relationships that we have with each other, with our students, with the parents. You have to have ways to navigate that are very intentional. And so I really appreciate what you said about being authentic. We need to be authentic. We need to recognize where where we may have fallen down or we're not we're not trained in these issues, and now we need to make sure that we are doing the lifelong learning that we want our students to be capable of, so that we're modeling that behavior for them, that authenticity.
It's beautifully said. And, we said a few minutes ago that, education has to reflect the society we're trying to keep up with. There's such a need in society. We've become so polarized and so many different interest groups are pitted against each other. The concept of forgiveness is profound in the sense that as educators, we need to model it and create that culture in our schools if we have a hope for society to eventually become more tolerant again. It's really important work you're doing here.
And as I said, we're learning from our students, and as the schools and as our organizations and as our societies are changing, and our polarization, but also all of the technology that we're dealing with, our kids are dealing with. These are issues that are constantly changing. And the thing that doesn't change is, what we mean by, what does it mean to be human for us, right? And what does that mean, and how is that played out in schools? How do we give students the skills they need for the future when we don't know what that future will look like?
And let me jump in if I might. So Mindy just talked correctly, appropriately, logically about technology, the world's changing, we don't know. Agreeing with her 100%. Let me tell you one of the other things I've been doing in my class speaking, which she talked about kindness. One of the things I've come to recognize is that too often in schools, there's not a strong sense of gratitude. We all are appreciative, we all are thankful, but that's not something that's at the forefront. So in a doctoral class I'm teaching right now, we're talking a whole lot about gratitude. And so every week, as I said, I've got assignments. Well, one of the things I did for the first 3 weeks, everybody had to write a handwritten thank you note to somebody. Now, when's the last time you got a handwritten thank you note? It's like, whoa. And it's interesting. So they've done that. And what I would ask next week, class would come back and I'd say, okay, raise your hand if you heard from the person to whom you wrote the thank you note, and your hands went up. How did they feel? They felt really great. And then I say, how did you feel? Well, guess what? The person who wrote the note felt great too. So what I'm trying to do is instill that. I did a presentation yesterday at a school, and one of the things I talked with them about, and we're doing that at University of Missouri St. Louis in our department meetings, is that every meeting meaning it's 2 people or more, every meeting begins with 90 seconds of folks quickly going around and saying for what they're grateful. Here's what I appreciate, here's what I'm thankful. And what happens is when you do that, you begin looking for things that you should be appreciative about, and other people do as well. And that little bitty act changes the tenor of the building. And that's the kind of change that an administrator or a teacher can initiate. And our program will give folks the wherewithal, if you will, to go back and do that in their schools.
It's amazing work. Yeah, and again, you're making me think. So ideal candidates for this program, I'm obviously thinking of district leaders and building leaders, but in the last 10 years, we have this phenomenon of teacher leaders. So who can benefit from this, and who would you like to see applying?
So absolutely, teacher leaders. And I think that what we are benefiting from is the diversity of the educators who feel like this is an area that they want to become experts in. And so we have had counselors. And the more diverse the student body, the better. The cohort, so it's a cohort model, and we have had students that are teachers, students that are counselors, students that are coaches, building coaches, students that are already administrators. And not just, but also we've had a student from Columbia, a student from, so we've had from both coasts, Washington State and the East Coast. We have inquiries from the Bahamas. We have students from as far away as Ghana. And so a mix of students, I think, is really important, because we need these different perspectives and different solutions, because we can learn from all of them. So we're hoping for a good mix. And so far, in terms of the students who have applied, we've gotten that mix, and we think it'll be really exciting.
Speak more to the diversity piece, please. And I'm thinking, as you're talking about across cultures and countries, what's the impact there, and why does the more diversity provide for more quality?
Well, I think one part of it is the intercultural, transnational piece of this is that, no matter what, it's a global world now. And so global leadership is incredibly important, knowing how to work with different people, because even our companies, they're not, it's not like just an American company. They work in other countries. The people you need to work with are going to come from other countries. So, and in all of our schools now, we have multiple languages being spoken. And so I think that this is another area in which cultural humility is so important, that we need to be able to work with diverse people and be able to talk across our differences. That doesn't mean that you have to adopt someone else's culture.
Yeah.
It's just that you have to be able to work together. You have to be able to talk to each other. You have to be able to listen. And I think listening skills are especially important. We learn listening skills in elementary school, and then we don't touch them again. Well, we touch them here, right? There are active models of listening. And how do we listen to each other, be respectful of each other? So I think that that global and that diverse and that perspective is incredibly important and something that we've really gained from. Tom?
Yeah, yeah, it's a cohort model, and so we're envisioning enrolling 15, 18, these young people. I've got to stop calling them kids. These young people who already have a master's degree would take all their courses together. They really get to know one another. And Mindy's talking about multicultural, and that's right. It's also, though, even much more microscopic than that. The current doctoral group with which we're working, there are people, as she said, from the state of Washington and the state of Missouri. Even they're talking about differences. It's very helpful. Education, I would argue, suffers certainly at a building level because schools are silos. People teach next door to one another. They don't really share ideas. I used to teach fifth grade, and I taught fifth grade for 5 years with a woman who was a friend. We played volleyball together, but whenever she walked in my classroom, I stopped and said yes. She never in those 5 years came in to watch me observe or to observe me. I never in those 5 years observed her.
Right.
If she would have said, Tom, I want to come in and see what you're doing, I would have thought, what's going on here? Well,
Yeah.
we're trying to break that down. And by having people from different backgrounds, nationally, internationally, racially, socioeconomically, ethnically, everything, we think people learn to listen. And as Mindy said, the best part of being a leader is that you learn from people who are around you, and you do that through listening.
Fantastic. So you get those first 2 years under your belt, and we're looking at the dissertation there in the horizon. How much flexibility do people in the program have in what the dissertation looks like?
A lot. This is where we have this saying from a colleague of ours, what sings to your heart, that we have remained committed to people being able to do independent dissertations so that they can make sure they're doing something that really matters in their role, that improves their role and therefore improves our education. Because while I believe in having the global perspective, education is local. And so we really want people to be able to struggle with and propose solutions for the problems that they see as most important in their environment and in their setting. So there is a lot of room for both creativity of methodology and creativity of content or topic.
Absolutely, yeah. It sings to your heart. I want to know what do these people want to know about? What do they want to become the expert? What bothers them? What turns them on? What do they want to get better at? So after 2 years, after reading, talking, being with their colleagues, their cohorts with us, they're going to come in and they're going to have an issue they really want to fix. Fix meaning I want to study it. I want to know how we can solve it. I want to know what the solutions are. That's pretty exciting.
It really is. And when they're looking at outcomes to those problems that they're so
Yes.
passionate about, can it be qualitative as well as quantitative? How do
Yep.
you look at that in the outcomes?
Well, I think that so we encourage, mixed methods. I personally think I love the understanding an issue deeply. So knowing the story about that issue, not just, although I was trained in quantitative methods,
Right.
I have been a qualitative researcher because I really want to understand how things change, how we bring about intentional change.
Yeah.
And so we are very open to both quantitative and qualitative research. Whichever, depending on what your question is, we're just committed to you having the skills to answer your question. So using the right methodology is more important than using any specific methodology. So I think that, and there are, since we were in school, there are some new types of methods for looking at questions, and we've been looking into that. How can AI facilitate
Yeah.
you looking at and analyzing data, especially qualitative data? How can you mine the literature, which is part of the research I've been doing for the last 25 years, to find out what works? What do we know about a particular issue? And then how do we go forward? How do we build that knowledge base? And so how can we use new tools
Yeah.
to build that knowledge? The social
Absolutely.
networking.
Yeah.
These are our methodologies that are relatively new and that we are very open to our students pursuing.
Walter, are you ready to enroll?
Sign me up. This sounds fun. This isn't just learning and growing. This sounds fun.
Yeah,
This like feeds your soul type stuff.
well put, yes.
Yeah.
We've
So
had a lot of fun.
I can tell. I can tell just by the way you talk about it. If I finish the 3 years and I get my EDD and everyone can call me doctor, then are there ways that uh, graduates can continue to feel like they have a partnership with UMSL and they can keep coming back and stay connected into the community? What might that look like?
I think both Tom and I are in the phase of we want to leave a legacy.
Yeah.
We want the next generation of people who care about these issues. For me, character education is if we are not developing that next generation, staying relevant to the K-12 world, then we're going to be, it's going to be an obsolete field. And I would really hate to see that happen. I think this is, our next generation of citizens. This is important work, and we want to be helping to contribute to that next generation. So we try to, as we're doing now, someone who was in that first online course that
Yeah.
we taught, she will now be part of this team of faculty that we hope will stay with our cohort of students.
Yes.
And we try to make sure that our students have opportunities to present at national conferences, to um, to write and publish,
Yep.
both in the scholarly world, but in the practical world, to do presentations and make a difference. And now, with things like this, the podcast. So we have a student now who regularly does podcasts with leaders. He mentors leaders, and so we're really trying to work into the curriculum those activities that will take them forward, that will help them build their current role, but what their next steps are.
You talk about ending on a high note. What a wonderful way of summarizing the vision for this. Are there things that we haven't touched on in this discussion that you want to make sure we mention?
Oh, yeah, we've got 4 more days to talk, but other than that, I mean, I think in an hour we hopefully people heard, and if they're interested, they can contact us. We'd love to talk with them.
Wonderful. Well, Tom and Mindy, thank you. This was a fantastic discussion, and I can't wait to get the word out to everyone, knowing that the next cohort is starting in January 2026. So now's the time to be thinking about it. Can they already apply? The window's open to apply if
Yes.
they're ready. Wonderful. And then
Classes would start in January, but you can apply now. It's online at the UMSL EDD. If you put in the search engine, UMSL, EDD,
Yeah.
you'll come up. And COE, right? So UMSL, UMSL, COE for College of Education,
Yep.
and then EDD. But I actually wanted, sorry, I wanted to thank you, Walter, for doing this with us, and also
Absolutely.
for the very really cool podcast, this Worthy Educator. It's a
Yes.
worthy endeavor,
Oh,
and
thank you.
I'm glad that that you've taken this on in your retirement. So it's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you so
Fun
much.
discussion.
Tom?
Thank you, Walter.
Yeah, very much. And I love the work. And so getting to work with professionals like yourself just make my day and make this all worthwhile. So looking forward to getting the word out, looking forward to hearing great things ahead. And thank you again for your time on a Friday afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.